Okay, welcome to this tutorial. It's called Into the Primitive, and it doesn't take a lot of effort to create some interesting, cool looking graphic image designed in a 3D animation program. And we're going to model this, what you see here, and it's actually quite simple. Every time you do this, it's going to look different. There's no certain order to follow or numbers to input. It's really interesting what you end up with each time you do this assignment. What you need, though, are three things. You need a cube, a light, and a camera. The cube, we're going to extrude it and manipulate the faces. And then we're going to apply a texture to it. And this texture or material will look like glass. And you can see here, my glass in the bottom left-hand corner there, it's sort of see-through, it's multicolored, and it rendered out lovely, in my opinion. The other thing is a light. And right now I've got a light set to about 200%. So it's twice as bright as a regular light. And you'll need more light than you think. You don't want this image looking too dark. And the last thing is a camera. And we just use the default camera in this program, but it's really cool to have your own camera installed, and then you can move that camera around. In this case, we're going to make it a very wide angle lens on our camera, and we're going to push it right inside of the primitive. Okay, here we go. File new. I'm going to start with that cube. There we go. Now, the cube, these are primitives. These are what you use to begin a model. We're not going to do much to this, but we are going to break it apart. So I'm going to make it editable, and then I'm going to click the face tool. Do not touch anything else. Don't click on the cube, don't click on a face, nothing. But you can right click on the stage, not on the cube, but on the stage. We're going to right click and we're going to go to extrude. And you learned how to extrude in Wings 3D, which means you take a face and you just extend it out. So I'm just moving my mouse to the right while I left click, like so. You don't have to extrude it too far. And then I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to the next one, extrude inner. Extrude inner in this program is very much like inset in Wings 3D. So I'm just going to bring it. I don't want to bring it in too far, just a little ways, like so. I'm going to look at my four portals. And then I'm going to right click and I'm going to extrude again. And this time I'm going to extrude it inward. I'll go about that distance there, not all the way through to the center point, the axis point right there, but I am going to overlap faces, which is okay in this assignment. Normally I say don't overlap faces. Right click, extrude inner, and then just left click, drag to the left. And now I'm going to right click, extrude, and I'm going to extrude it back out, like so. Right click, extrude inner, just a little ways, and right click, extrude. And I'm going to repeat this step back and forth. Right click, extrude, back out, and you can see I'm creating sort of hallways inside of hallways inside of hallways, or walls inside of walls inside of walls. And I'll right click, extrude inner, bring it down, right click, extrude, bring it back, getting closer to the center, extrude inner, right click, extrude, back out, so I can see that face a little bit easier. And then back inside again, and I'll leave it like that. You want to have a whole bunch of these lines in here, and that tells me that I've got all these hallways, these walls, multi walls. I'm going to select the model tool and this move tool again. So I'm going back to the beginning. So that's what my cube looks like. Now I need to apply a texture to it. So I'll go create, new material, and I'm going to double click on the material, and I'm going to go to color, and I'm going to select a color. You know what? I'm going to go with like a blue, and I'll click OK. And then I'm going to go with transparency. And normally with transparency, it's going to pick up that color. But what I really want to do is change the transparency color itself. Try that, see what happens. There we go. I'm going to bump up the transparency so I've got a little bit of yellow in there as well as the blue. I can go back in and change it if it's not to my liking, but we'll see what that does. Okay. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some refraction right here. Refraction means when light bends, and when you hit glass, light will bend. So light strikes the glass and it bends a little bit. If it's good glass, you don't see that refraction hardly at all. But normally, you can see a little bit of refraction. It's kind of like when you take a straw and you stick it in water. It looks like your straw is bent. I'm just going to bump this up just a little bit, and these straight lines will start to bend. I don't need a lot, just a little. Yeah, like 1.03 is good. There's a little bit of curvature. Excuse me. A little bit of a curvature there instead of just straight lines behind my glass there. And finally, I'm going to add a reflection. And I'll just bump this down. I may go in and actually change the color of the reflection, or I may not. But I'll bump the reflection down a little bit. And I'll close it. And right now, when I click this, I just have this blah gray. But when I throw my texture onto my cube and hit play, or pardon me, branded preview, I can actually see right through it. Not too bad. Okay. Next thing I'm going to add is a light. And not a target light or sunlight or spotlight, just a light. And right now it's right in the center. And I'm just going to bump this up to 200%. Almost like I have two lights sitting right together. And I'll bump that. There we go. Now I can see my two colors a little bit. I've got my blue, I've got my yellow, and when they mix together, I get some green in there, which is kind of cool. Okay, next thing that I need after my cube and my light is a camera. And right now, we are using the default camera. And we can move that default camera around if we want to, no problem. But I want a different kind of camera where I can really make use of it. So I need what's called a target camera. I'm going to click target camera, and it's going to give me a camera plus a target. The target is right inside, right at 000. And the camera is sitting outside looking down, almost in the same location as my default camera. But in this case, we are actually going to go inside of it. And when I go here to cameras, there it is right there, camera. But I'm going to call it the Wallace Cam. There we go. So now you know what I'm talking about. So when I go here to cameras and use camera, there's the Wallace Cam. And we're actually going to be sitting right inside of this little camera right here. This old-fashioned cinema camera. I'll click Wallace Cam, and now we're actually right inside. And if I move this camera around, notice what happens. It's always looking at that target. But if I select the target and move the target, the camera follows the target. It's great for animation to use a target camera. But in this case, it's going to help with our final product. So right now we're looking right at that light, straight into it. But I'm going to do a couple things before we actually move the camera inside. I'm going to change the focal length. So right now it's at 36 millimeters, but I'm going to make this even smaller. Notice that the camera is sitting here in this position and right here in the front view. I'm going to change the focal length, but it's not going to actually change anything except the perspective view. So watch this. I'm going to change this to 55. And, sorry, not 55. I'm going to change it to 5. So now I've got a 5 millimeter lens, which is, I'm not even sure if they sell those lenses. They sell 10 millimeter, 20 millimeter, 28 millimeter, and those are wide angle lenses. The thing about a wide angle lens is that it distorts things. It distorts straight lines. And it also makes things look different. So we look like we're far away, but we're not. So I'm going to move the Wallace cam inside the primitive. So I'm just going to drag it, and because it's always looking at that target, I know I'm just going to drag it right inside. Now I'll click perspective view, click the render view button, and see what I have. Not too bad. Not too bad. It looks different than what I have initially shown you, but that's okay. That's okay. One other thing that I can do is I can create a hypernerb. So a hypernerb is a smoothing formula, and you can see that the wireframe looks like a cube, but it's like a little round ball in the middle of it. So this is the same in Wings 3D when you do a shift tab, but I actually need to drag my cube and place it inside the hypernerbs. And now when I do that, have a look at this. You can see what's happened. Those hallways are now curved. And they're rendered out in a particular way. You can see here the subdivision editor. It's quite choppy, and that may be what you're interested in. You may like those choppy lines. But if you want to smooth them out, make them look a little more organic, you can. Just bump these two numbers up, and when I click Render Preview again, you can see how everything looks so rounded. And you can have that. The thing I don't like is that it looks very symmetrical. So using the camera target, I'm going to move the target off center a little bit, like so. There we go. Now let's see. Yeah, see, that looks a little less symmetrical. I'm going to pull the cube out of the hypernerbs for now, and I'm going to add a deformation. So I'm going to try maybe, let's see, how about, I'm going to try a twist. I'll try a twist. There's the twist. And I need to put the twist inside my cube. So it's a child of my cube. And what you're going to see in the other three portals is me twisting this cube. I'm going to change the angle. I'm going to click and drag. I'll just drag up, and you can see what's happening. It's twisting. So I'm going to twist my faces and see what I get there. Not too bad. If that light is too bright, I can go back down here. All right, I'm going to bump this down to maybe, let's try 150. Not bad. I can still see my colors. Not too bad at all. Okay. One of the other things you can do instead of twist, excuse me, my apologies, you could do something like shatter. And when you put in shatter, it's like you're breaking glass and it's starting to fall. So I'm just going to bump up the strength here, and you can see what happens in this portal view right here, that the bottom stays kind of in the same position, but all of the other things up top just kind of fall down. So you can do something like shatter, see what happens here. There we go. I'm going to go in and I'm going to change the color, and I'm going to see if I can darken this up a little bit and see what happens now. Yeah, I like that a little bit better. You can use shatter. What happens if we use, for example, explosion? And we take the explosion, we place it inside the cube, and we increase the strength of the explosion. And all of these faces are breaking apart like that. So it doesn't take much. You can see I'm sitting at, what, 7%? So it doesn't take much. Let's see what I got there. That's not too bad. If I throw my cube back inside the hypernerves, it's going to look like that. And I'm not sure if I want that. So I'm going to pull that out. I'm going to go back to my light. And I'm going to add a shadow. And when I add a shadow, it's going to take longer to render. And now see how dark it looks? Because I've added a shadow. So I might just go back here and bump this back up to 200% for my light. And I'm going to bring this up a little bit bigger. There we go. That's looking kind of neat, isn't it? I like that. So it's not difficult. You may have to play around with your material, right? You may have to say, okay, you know what? That reflection, I need to increase my reflection and see what happens. Again, when you increase amounts of properties, it's going to take longer to process, so you have to be patient. You can do the render region instead of a preview, instead of previewing the whole thing. But I actually really like this. It's looking good. Cube, explosion, get rid of the hypernerves. You've got a camera, which is a target camera, and I've made that a wide angle lens by changing the settings, right? Changing the settings down here from 5. Oh, I'm going to change this to 55. 5 and 55, because now it's even wider, right? Before it was 36 and 32, something like that. And you had a field of view that was 50 degrees. But when I change it to 5, it changes that field of view to 145 degrees. See that? And then when I change this to 55, bigger sensor, it changes it even more to almost like 160 degrees. So it really distorts everything. And it stretches all these lines out, which is kind of cool. I like this assignment. I hope you do too. And you just have to play around with it a bit. Adjust your colors, see what works for you, adjust your reflection and the opacity, the transparency, pardon me, and play around with the light. The light might not be in the right location for you. You may even need to add another light in a different location. But shadow on that light, that tends to help. Look at that. So that's it. You'll need to do a render to picture viewer after you've edited your settings, and then you can hand that in. And I'm just going to sit here and watch this render out, because I'm done. That's it. Rendering out every little individual pixel. See that? Ooh, maybe I should go get a cup of coffee. I like it.